March is dear to all women as we celebrate International Women's Day on the 8th of this month. Yes, we did it just yesterday. The way in which we think of ourselves has everything to do with how our world sees us and how we see ourselves successfully acknowledged by the world, says Arlene Rankin. The world commemorates International Women's Day 2021, a day to reflect on the changing female role in society and our momentous social, economic, and political achievements. There is a duty to give thanks for the women who have taught us, led us, and influenced us to live to our fullest potential. Organizations around the world will focus on themes that reflect the local, national, and global gender issues relevant to their work and context. On this occasion, the Justice Coalition of Religious and the Apostolic Carmel and Sacred Art Teacher Training Institute have collaboratively marked this event through this online webinar, where we connect to our larger world to think, reflect, and share the richness of different women thinkers from today's forum. Before we commence this session, let us listen to the reflections on women in the light of scriptures from different religions. The lecturer and the dear students of Sacred Art Teacher Training will lead us.
Rig Veda, women as Grihalakshmi. The oldest scripture, Rig Veda, has placed women on a high pedestal. Women are considered Grihalakshmi, or the wealth of the home. A woman or a wife is and was a must for performing yagnas. That's why Sri Ram had to construct a golden Sita Mata to perform the yagna. Women are thus so important that Lord Shiva did not hesitate to destroy the Daksha Yagna. It reveals how important women are to human life. Women as mothers. Women as our mothers and grandmothers were the pillars of a family, and women were respected as a pilot of the family. Down the ages, they are considered as equal to men. In the natural order of creation, there is no difference between men and women. Anatomically, women may be structurally weaker, but for inner strength and resilience, they are equal to and often surpass men. Best of all, they possess the ability to become a mother, an attribute that no man can boast of.
The honor of women in Islam.
A reading from Holy Quran, chapter 14 to 19. The honor of women in Islam. O mankind, reverence your guidance, Lord, who created you from a single person, created of like nature, is made, and from this pair scattered like seeds, countless men and women. Reverence Allah, through whom you demand your mutual right, and reverence the womb that bore you, from Allah ever watches over you. Subhanallah, glory be to God. In Islam, women are positioned as such a high and noble place that they are mentioned 3 times in a row by the Prophet himself. In ancient time, women did not get any inheritance when their relative died. So Allah revealed a verse about inheritance, giving the right of it to women. In the end, all of those were done in order to elevate women and glorified them, giving them the full right to everything. Erase their mystery and save them from adversity, abjection, and discrimination and intermediation and all trouble things that had let ever happen to them. As if this are all not good enough, there is even one chapter in the noble Holy Quran dedicated to women and named after them. And Nisa means woman. In Islam, the position of a mother is more glorified than that of a father. This is testified in one of the Prophet hadith that goes as follows. An apostle asked the Prophet, O messenger of God, among all mankind, who is it that I am much obliged to glorify? That Prophet answered, your mother. And then who else? Again the man asked, your mother. Again the Prophet answered, and then who else? The man asked for the third time, your mother. Still answered the Prophet, and then who else? Asked the man for the fourth time, your father. At last the Prophet said, Amen.
The Bible is filled with wisdom and encouragement for women of all ages. God made women in his image for a special reason, and the word of the Lord reminds us of this fact each and every day through specific verses and stories passed down of powerful women such as Mary, Esther, Judith, Rachel, Rebecca, Ruth, and more. These leaders, mothers, and faithful forces were spiritual guides during their lifetimes and are still inspirations for us women today. God created you as a woman. God created man in his own image, male and female, he created them. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. It means that we bear God's image, whether we are male or female. Your feminine heart has been created with the greatest of all possible as a reflection of God's own heart. You are a woman to your soul, to the very core of your being. And so the journey to discover what God meant when he created woman in his image, when he created you as his woman, that journey begins with your heart. It is said in Proverbs, she is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come, and also she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness in her is on her tongue. Isaiah says, you will be a crown of splendor in the Lord's hand, a royal diadem in the hand of your God. Jesus empowered, protected, honored, confided in, and celebrated women. He respected women and held them in high esteem, as he clearly demonstrated in his relationships with women like Mary Magdalene, Mary his mother, and even the woman at the well. There is nothing amazing and special about the heart of a woman. It is uniquely made to reflect the heart of the Heavenly Father. Jeremiah chapter 27, verse 7. And you, dear women of God, are close to the heart of your Father. He longs to pull you close and fill in those empty places that are causing you pain.
Eternal God, you are the foundation that enables everything we should stand. Thank you for fearfully and wonderfully creating each of us. Thank you for giving us worth in your eyes. Help us live as the one you uniquely intend us to be. Help us to live peacefully and joyfully as daughters of God and co-heirs with your creative work. Faithful Father, thank you that you are our source of delight and wonder. As we meet together as your beloved daughters, may we be reminded of our faithfulness to generations of women who have done and gone before us. May we go from strength to strength as you shape us into your likeness. Defeat the power and darkness in our lives. Help
আপুনি
us
যে এটা ফোন কিনকচোন চবৰ আগতে মই
obstacle that stands in our path. This prayer we make in your name. Amen.
Amen. We extend our appreciation to the teacher trainees of Sacred Heart TTI for leading us and making us feel the divine presence in this virtual gathering. Now I request Dr. Stansilla, the General Counselor, Apostolic Carmel, to speak words of welcome.
A blessed morning and a warm welcome to the international webinar organized by the Congregation of Apostolic Carmel, Sacred Heart D.Ed College, Bangalore, in collaboration with Justice Coalition of Religious. I'm sure this morning session is going to be a webinar with a difference to mark the International Women's Day. We know that all of you would be busy with various programs in our institutions yesterday, 8th March, International Women's Day, but wanted you to be free for a full participation in this webinar. We are indeed fortunate to have with us our dear sister Nirmalini, both the host and the speaker on the panel, along with distinguished guests, Dr. Saldana and Ms. Anita Cherier. It is significant to note that the three concepts of this session this morning, women and education, women and work, and women and health, these are the major areas of the mission of Apostolic Carmel. And we are sure to have more insights into our directions and approaches in this field as we face challenges of new normal, a new world with the pandemic COVID-19. A warm welcome to the distinguished eminent speakers and the participants of this webinar. We have the heads of institutions, the staff, students, lecturers, professors of our colleges in and abroad. Welcome to one and all. A warm welcome. Over to now Sister Clarice, the principal of Sacred Heart D.Ed College, Bangalore, to give us the concept of the seminar and the schedule of the day. Sister Clarice.
Thank you, Sister Ancilla, for your inclusive welcome. Women's Day has its origin in women coming together to assert their rights. Coming together is always critical, experiencing strength. While celebrations around the color pink, the red roses are often pleasant. The need for solidarity and assertion to claim our rights should not be forgotten. This year, we have two very relevant themes being promoted internationally. The UN theme for 2021, Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. IWD 2021 campaign theme is Choose to Challenge. In a sense, they both are complementary in our context today. COVID has created a situation where more women than ever are facing severe challenges, losing out on hard-won freedoms, both at their workspaces and personal spaces. Many have lost access to education and medical services. Many have no work and not enough resources to meet their basic needs. And if you are forced to be in hostile, abusive spaces and relationships, the stress can be unbearable. Nothing substantial changes during this 1-hour conversation, but certainly we can inspire each other and gain from insights shared and a deeper understanding of challenges and opportunities. And so the agenda for the day is to inspire through sharing space and gain from the experiences shared about how the world of women is challenged by a health, education, and work, and how they can become means to empower us. We have 3 speakers with us today for this session who will speak about 15 to 20 minutes each. Participants, please note, you will post your comments and questions in the chat box, which will be taken up at the end of the session. A woman's health is her capital. Healing yourself is connected with healing others. The World Health Association defines health as the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just the absence of disease. This includes the ability to adapt and recover from illnesses and new threats. Women's health is made up of our mental, physical, emotional, financial, relational, sexual, and spiritual well-being. We have our first speaker, Dr. Shaibia Saldana, one of the most renowned gynecologist doctors in the city. Dr. Saldana works at Acura Specialty Hospital in Koramangala and has been serving to offer end-to-end gynecological treatments to women. She has offered valuable services at St. John's Medical College for several years, from treating various gynecological conditions in women to conducting periodical checkups. To keep a track of health, she provides complete care and treatment. Her care, concern, empathy, and true interest heals the patients who go to her. She is the co-founder of the organization Enfold Protective Health Trust, started in 2001 in Bangalore, working on issues of child sexual abuse, sexualization of children, mental and emotional health of your youth, and sexuality among adolescents and young adults. It also aims at empowering children and adults and designed to initiate change in behavior and attitude. Her workshops, seminars, and counseling sessions are most valued. We looked up to you today, Dr. Saldana, as a woman who is enlightened to enlighten and empower others. Dr. Saldana will speak on women on health. Participants will kindly post their questions in the chat box, which will be answered after 3 talks. Now, over to Dr. Saldana.
Thank you, Sister Clarice, for saying all those lovely words. Enlightenment is still far away. I'm still walking that road. I have a long way to go before I hit enlightenment. Right now, I have a small light over my head, and that's about it. Yes, so there is so much to talk. You know, I could talk for 2 years on women and health. It's just impossible to encompass that, but I'm going to try and shorten it in 15 minutes to speak about what has really come up during this year of COVID. I think the first thing we've realized is the value of women. You know, all of us remember that our grandmothers, our mothers would be the first to wake up in the morning and the last to sleep. They would be there every time when we were worried and anxious about exams. The food was on the table, everything. They would close down the house and go to sleep last. And we, unconsciously swallow all that and take it in as our message. But unfortunately, what also comes in is this huge level of sacrifice that women do. Like I would remember if there were 4 sweets on the table and there were 5 of us, my mother would say, I don't feel like eating sweets today. And so my father and we children would eat it up. If there was some special food she had made and we were all eating it up and we really liked it and we looked at it, she would say, I don't feel like eating this. I'm going to eat yesterday's rice and dal from the fridge. And it was so unconscious that this whole way of sacrificing it wasn't even considered as a sacrifice. It was just what she said in a way. And I think somewhere we women need to break that, because what is happening is we neglect ourselves. I've seen this during the COVID time. Women have been taking care of elders in the house, taking care of children. They're sitting with children on their online studies. They are running the household completely. In between, when there was no domestic workers, they handle every single thing. And yet their strain was such, but they are not acknowledged for that. And I think that is where we go wrong. That it is important to value women's work. And obviously, as we know, that the fact that they are not paid for this has no value, right? So one of the things it's important for us women to know is to take care of ourselves. And in taking care of ourselves, we need to look after our health. We know that cancers of the cervix, cervical cancer, is the greatest killer of women in rural India. And the breast cancer is now building up as one of the greatest cancers for women in cities. And yet both are partly preventable and definitely can be caught early at a time when it is 100% curable. All it needs is a woman to understand that after the age of 35, she has to have pap smears regularly. For a woman to have a breast examination starting from the age of 20. Are you aware that even 25-year-old girls can get breast cancer? And all we have to do is examine our breasts ourselves, learn how to do a self-examination, and that will reduce the incidence of breast cancer almost by 50% if we just examine it, rather than wait for a checkup to a hospital when we have a huge lump in the breast, which has already gone towards a stage 3 or 4. So one of the things is taking care of ourselves. Now, when we look at health checkups also, after the age of 35, we tell women, take care of your health, get a blood test done. If you have diabetes in your family, high blood pressure, see that you eat well, eat healthy. Now, usually women like food somewhat different from their homes. When they get married and go to any place, the food over there is often different. And women give up eating foods that they enjoyed. For example, for me, it was bitter gourd. I love bitter gourd. And at home, we used to love eating it. My husband and kids hate bitter gourd. So they would never eat it. And you know how you feel, why should I cook it for one person? So I would never cook it. But much, much later, I started taking, after I was 40 and the kids were grown up and my husband was, traveling, I would make bitter gourd for myself and I enjoyed it so much. And I wondered, why did I give up this wonderful flavor? And so now I cook for myself at least once or twice a week. I will cook something which I like, which is good for me, which I enjoy. And that gives me such a sense of happiness. I cook for my family. I love them dearly. I cook for myself and I love myself very dearly too. And I think that is something I have learned much, much later. The next thing I wanted to mention is that so often we look at women only as a mother. And I think we need to understand that a woman's creative energy is her uterus and her ovaries. So we hold our energy, as someone had mentioned in the earlier scriptures, that a woman has the ability to have a baby which men do not have. And not just ability to have a baby, the ability to carry a baby for 9 months, to be able to deliver a baby, to take care of a vulnerable human being for the next 5, 6 years of their life till they are able to stand up on their own. Sometimes right till end. I mean, my grandmother used to come and take care of me when my babies were born. So they will, for the next 25, 30, 50, 70 years, they take care of us. To understand that just having a child is only one part of your creative energy. Nowadays, I have young couples who say, Doctor, we don't want to have children. And when I say why, they say, because doctor, we don't think the world is a safe place. I don't know if my child will get clean water, a violence free life. It's not that we don't love children, we love them too much. And so we would rather foster a child. We would rather look at children who don't have parents, take care of them, mentor them, give them a scholarship, get involved in their lives, not just paying money towards some fees of a child, but actually bringing the child home, talking to the child, a child who has lost their parents, don't have parents, who need a mentor, somebody who says, I care about you. I want to know what your future is. What are you planning? What would you like to do? What are your skills and talents? Would you like to learn a musical instrument? Can I pay for that? These are the things which make a difference to someone's life. So we have to understand that while children are beautiful, it is very important to understand a child is too precious to have by accident. Very well, people tell me, we were only wanting 1 or 2 children, but when we got pregnant, we just had it. I'm like, what? How can you just have a baby? A child is too precious, an entire human being. The responsibility is too big for you to just say, it happened. Even to buy a scooter or a cycle or a car or a small apartment, you will think 100 times. Look at your financial ability to take care of the flat, pay the EMIs. And yet for a child, we take it so lightly. It's very important that we consider the preciousness of the child when we commit to having a baby. Again, coming back for women, the fact that creative energy means art, sculpture, it means creating an institution, it means mentoring people. All these things are included in a woman's ability to be creative. It is not just having babies. And so sometimes when I have couples who are not able to have a child, and I see the way they are diminished, disrespected, and humiliated by people just because they cannot have a child for some reason, I think that's very wrong. And we must understand that women are not just walking uteruses to produce babies for society's sake. There is something more. And if a couple cannot have babies, we should never ever disrespect them or treat them in a way which is humiliating. That is not acceptable at all. In each one's life, there is some creativity which we can do, which will come up for us. And finally, looking at the space of how we talk to people about whether you're having children, whether your work, which other speakers will be talking about, I want to talk about the importance of us women as mentors and supporters of younger women. In a family, instead of disrespecting a young woman who comes in, whether it's a daughter or a daughter-in-law, helping her to understand how to live her life, to be strong, rather than telling women, don't go to work, you have to look after your family, saying, I will help you in the house so that you can go to work, so that you can be both at work and you need help in the house. We often disrespect, I find younger women in families are disrespected by told you don't know how to cook properly, you don't know how to take care of a house properly, trying to put impossible standards. And that is where we need to change. I think for me, one of the greatest role models in my life were my parents and both my grandmothers. For both my parents, we were 3 sisters. And I remember always people would ask, oh, how many children do you have? And my mother or father would say, 3 daughters. And they would say, and sons? Well, when you say 3 daughters, it means 3 daughters. It means no sons, right? So they would say, no, no sons. And they say, oh, you don't have sons. And my parents would look at them and smile and say, no, we don't feel the need. We have 3 daughters and we are blessed. And I think unconsciously hearing that all the time gave me such a great sense of being a woman, of being a girl. I felt so powerful because I had my parents standing behind me. And whenever we would go, I used to go trekking with friends. I used to do so many things. When I joined medicine, I would travel at 11, 12 in the middle of the night, coming back from hospital to home. And my parents never ever said, you should not do this. They trusted me to understand my safety. They trusted me to be safe. And they never stopped me ever from saying, you shouldn't do this because you're a girl. In fact, my mother would say, of course you can do it. Why do you think only boys can do this? Of course, girls can do it. And that unconscious sense of a pillar of strength that my parents were behind me made such a difference to all three of us. So I was a doctor, my middle sister is a psychologist professor, and my younger sister is a lecturer. She's a professor of design. So all of us got that strength in our lives to be able to handle so many challenges which come. And both my grandmothers. My paternal grandmother studied till class 4. She was born when her mother, she was the eldest daughter of her mother, who was only 13 when my grandmother was born. So you can just imagine. She would go to school, and then in class 4, she told her father, I don't want to go to school. And her father said, okay, stay at home and help your mother. And she did that. She helped her mother with the younger siblings. And then she was married at 16, and she was shifted to Bombay, where my grandfather worked with Tatas. And this girl who had only studied till class 4, learned English, learned to read and write English. She used to learn to read and write Marathi because she was in Bombay. And I would remember when I would go to visit her in her flat, we would stand in the balcony and we would see the local trains going with all these ladies standing in the local trains. And she would say, look at these women. I see them every day. They wear their saris so beautifully, so crisp and clean. They finish their housework, they go to work, they come back. Even in the evening, they look so neat and tidy. Look at them. They're running their houses, they're working. And so that made a difference. So that helped a lot. And my other grandmother, she got widowed when she was 42. She took care of her daughters. She built her own house for herself with her husband's pension. And whenever once a year, she would come down and spend 2 months with me in Bangalore. And she was such a warm, caring person. I don't remember ever criticizing me. If I said, oh no, I burnt the dal, she would say, it's okay, we'll eat the top part. If I said, oh my gosh, my chapatis are looking so horrible, she would smile and say, why does the chapati shape matter? As long as it tastes good, it's fine. And having this sort of a wonderful support in my life, I think it gave me the need to go forward. It also taught me the importance of supporting young women. And I think instead of criticizing young women, a younger professor, a younger student in my class, a teacher, a younger woman in my own family, we should actually look at what is the thing we can admire about them, what can we praise about them to give them the strength to go forward. Life is not easy. I have young women coming to me at 25, 30 with diabetes, high blood pressure, thyroid problems. And I think part of it is the stress of trying to cope with the world around us. It is not easy. Women study as hard, or if not much, much harder than men, to study, to get educated. And yet at the end of it, it is expected that they should get married and just be at home. I think it is very, very important that we help women to be able to continue working if they choose. It is a choice that women should make, whether they would like to be at home with their families or be with their families as well as work. And it is the importance of all of us senior women to support women in their endeavors. And I think that is a great need for health. And I also tell women, please do a little physical exercise. We think housework is physical exercise. It's not. It's very tiring. It's very exhausting. It can be back-breaking, but it's not. And health-wise, I would tell every woman, 15 minutes every day. Just take a little time for yourself. Whether you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or you just stand in your balcony or sit in a place which is quiet and peaceful before the house wakes up, or in the evening, say 15 minutes is my time for me just to gather my thoughts and myself and be relaxed and get the strength to run the next day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shoiba Saldana, for speaking on the challenges women face in terms of their health and what women in leadership positions needs to do, strengthen women's access to health. Thank you for sharing your own experience with us. Dear doctor, you highlighted the importance of women learning to respect and take care of their own health. You gave us the understanding that having a child is only one creative option, but of many other out of many other possibilities. You threw light on the fact that a woman's life has value beyond having children or being married. You also cautioned at one point, artificial reproductive techniques can deeply harmful to women's bodies, and we need to be aware of this. I do appreciate and value the call given to always support younger and more vulnerable women in one's family, in one's community and society. Yes, learning to live in ways that promote health is a radical act of self-love. It is a powerful act of resistance. Attending to our health is rooted in loving the fullness of ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. Thank you so much, Dr. Saldana. Participants, please, you are welcome to post your questions directed to Dr. Saldana in the chat box. We'll take it up later. The empowerment of women, their equal education and participation will create more inclusive, just, and progressive societies. Education is a milestone of women empowerment because it enables them to respond to challenges, to confront their traditional role and change their life. Education is one of the ways to spread the message of women empowerment. We have with us Reverend Sister Nirmalini AC, the Superior General of the Apostolic Carmel Congregation, a versatile personality, an eminent educationist who has dedicated her life for the cause of upliftment of the poor and marginalized, a dynamic leader and as an able administrator who also takes immense interest in contemporary global issues concerning education, politics, economy, religion, and spirituality. The best teacher awardee, the best principal awardee, Sister Nirmalini, as a woman leader, moved out of the comfort zone and thought out of the box to give her best in the field of education, inspired thousands of students, teachers, and people. She is the right person to speak to us on women and education on this occasion. Nelson Mandela says, education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. Let us now listen to Sister Nirmalini, who will speak to us on women and education. Over to Sister Nirmalini.
Thank you, Sister Clarice. Good morning, Dr. Saldana. Anita Cheria, nice to meet you, an ex-Carmelite from Delhi, and Agnes, and all of you. I want to begin by congratulating all the women gathered here as we meet for this webinar to celebrate Women's Day. In truth, we are meeting to celebrate and share the lives of women for being who we are. In the words of the famous French physicist, Dr. Marie Curie, we must believe that we are gifted for something and that this thing, at whatever cost, must be attained. In the context of the theme of today's webinar, we need to highlight the lives of certain women who made a mark during the time of pandemic by their undaunted spirit, their life of service, determination, and daring to be the first. Remembering some of our heroic women, 24th of March 2020 will forever be etched in our memories as it was the beginning of a change we could never have imagined, when suddenly the entire nation went in for a complete lockdown. As the nation geared to face the unknown of COVID-19, who were the first to sacrifice their time and energy, their vacations with family, who had to put in long hours of work without minding the danger to their own health and their families? Yes, these were and are warriors, the frontline health workers, mainly the doctors and nurses, a majority among whom were women. The ones we need to celebrate next are those who dared to be resilient and courageous amidst all odds, and perhaps the ones who were the worst affected, the poor migrant communities. They not only lost their means of livelihood, but were forsaken by all those whom they served. They had to walk hundreds of kilometers to their rural homes. Even old women walked and walked, tired and worn out. Pregnant mothers delivered their babies on the roadside. A young girl from Bihar, Jyoti Kumari, all of 16 years of age, cycled over 1,200 kilometers to bring her ailing father home during the lockdown from Haryana to Darbhanga. She is currently the brand ambassador of the Bihar government Social Welfare Department to fight drug abuse. And if you recall the news around this time, there were many who invited her for training to be an athlete. And I salute this young girl who shoved aside all ideas and all corporate offers and rightly and wisely made the choice to educate herself. COVID-19 withstanding, and not to be deterred by it, an all-women pilot crew made aviation history in India when they flew the first ever longest non-stop flight from San Francisco to Bengaluru over the North Pole by taking the Atlantic route to reach Karnataka on the other end of the globe. And friends, today, as we celebrate, I also feel proud and happy that the pilot who led the entire crew, who oversaw the safety measures on that flight, was Captain Nivedita Basin, an alumni of Carmel Convent School, Delhi. I had the opportunity of interacting with her on a number of occasions, and I clearly, vividly remember her address to the school. And she said that education is where she is today. Her father had a complete loss and breakdown in business, and she owes her entire life to the sisters of Carmel, Delhi, who said, it's okay, you need not move out of the school. And she said it was not only her, but two other siblings as well. And they took care of her education throughout. And today, her name is recorded in history. A young fiery politician, Ms. Mahua Moitra of Trinamool Congress, made a bold and courageous speech in Parliament when she spoke on courage and cowardice, challenging the present government of its cowardice in dealing with dissenters. She was fearless of the repercussions of her speech, setting an example for many women in the country who feel suppressed and oppressed. While these women made name by their extraordinary deeds, there were many teachers and other women who are our unsung heroines. Despite the challenges thrown at us by COVID, they maintained a work balance of life, as Dr. Saldana shared. They juggled between household chores, teaching, taking care of their families and their children, the kitchen, and at times their sulking husbands, among other things. They should never be forgotten. We salute all of them today. The farm protest. For the first time, we have seen women in large numbers at the farm protest. So much so that the Chief Justice of India, Mr. Bobde, had to ask as to what the women were doing at the protest. Should he be reminded that it is women who are the backbone of society and not just men? Finally, we think of all the women who looked after those who were most in need at the time of distress. Those who cooked food, stitched PPE kits and masks, and in some cases opened their homes to those on the road. I am certain that many of you present here today and all religious congregations have reached out in various ways during this lockdown. Close to home, our own Apostolic Carmel congregation, as a matter of policy, took a decision that no parent will withdraw their ward from our schools during these difficult times. As a congregation, we also decided that we would cater not only to the education of children, but also provide for food for those families who were disadvantaged. Very early into the lockdown, as many communities would have, our communities too reached out, preparing masks for free distribution. Here in Bangalore, the sisters stitched PPE suits for the health workers of St. John's Hospital. In Mumbai, our sisters continue to reach out to the migrant community by providing dinner every single day for the past 12 months. And the Delhi community reached out by arranging buses for the migrants to reach their homes. Largely, it was women everywhere, driven by their motherly instinct, who were the first to reach out in love and service. And today, we need to celebrate our ability to nurture and care for those most in need. The impact of the pandemic on education. I want to spend the next few minutes focusing my thoughts on the field that I belong, namely education. The silent sufferer and perhaps the victim of pandemic's collateral damage has been the education of our children. The focus of many debates has been the economy and of course health and possible vaccines. The disruption in education, however, will have severe repercussions which will only be visible in the future. The World Bank report, Broken and Beaten, COVID-19 in South Asia, has quantified the impact of school closures in monetary terms, and India is estimated to lose 32.3 lakh crore in possible future earnings. The reason we need to discuss education here is because some school leadership positions and a vast majority of our teachers are women. Similarly, more girls have been impacted than boys when it comes to education. School leadership quality is among the biggest factors ensuring high quality student learning worldwide. Women school leaders develop greater interactivity with children, helping them achieve larger engagement with learning, ensuring better results. Developing women school leaders is therefore key to improving school education in India and across the world. The proportion of women teachers in developing countries, including India, has risen significantly in recent years. However, their participation in school leadership is comparatively low due to engraved negative perception as well as severe social cultural barriers. The negative impact of pandemic. All the school teaching went digital, confined to homes for majority of the students. The digital, however, was an unanticipated obstacle for many teachers who were experts in book, chalk, face-to-face classroom methods. They had to be trained to meet challenges of the present situation and go ahead with online teaching. Many educators looked for alternative jobs to sustain their families as they lost their teaching jobs or their salaries were withheld. Some former teachers are now trying to fit into jobs that they can get. Even if they had internet access, many students struggle to obtain the gadgets needed for digital learning, especially in families more than a single child. Then there was discrimination made between boys and girls. The parents chose to keep the girls at home and boys were provided with facilities. Again, this discrimination has been seen in the past too, where boys are given the work to clean the boats, while the girls were asked to sweep the floors and mop the floors. The midday meal provision is a great blessing to many students in India. Closure of schools during lockdown meant many children were deprived and thus malnourished. There were hundreds of cases of domestic violence, sexual abuse. The recent comment made by the highest office in the country, that of the CJI, stating that a rape accused should marry the minor victim. Where was the noise? It only came from women, only to be quieted again by the Bar Council. Discrimination is found not only in civil society, but also in the church. Church has been too slow to open for women's participation in responsible places. Thanks to Pope Francis, however, that things are beginning to change, though again very slowly. On the other hand, we as a nation are battling another divide based on religion. The hate campaign against minorities is on the constant rise, often supported by those in power. We as women leaders must ensure to enlighten and dispel the darkness surrounding this area. As times passed and days turned into months and a year, all of us still have doubts and questions. When will life be normal? When will the administration of vaccines to all, especially the poor, be completed? But life continues to go on, and so does education. We sense the great damage done to the field of education in this era of coronavirus. This data helps us to understand the extent of damage. Over 1.5 million schools across India closed down due to the pandemic. A switch to large-scale digital education is not possible now. According to a survey conducted by Campaign Against Child Labor, Tamil Nadu and Puducherry, child labor has increased by nearly 280% among vulnerable communities in the post-COVID period in Tamil Nadu. Only 24% households have access to internet, according to the 2019 government survey. In rural India,
Yeah, she's got muted.
The Education Ministry's budget for digital e-learning was slashed to rupees 469 crore in 2021, the year COVID struck, from rupees 604 crore the previous year. While students in many states have gradually started returning to schools and colleges, but there are many who are still confined to homes, spending long hours online, leading to concerns over physical and mental health triggered due to the prolonged use of electronic devices and the lack of meaningful companionship of their peers. The education ecosystem of India is weighed down by myriads of issues such as school dropouts, learning deficiencies, teacher absenteeism, gender disparity, and lack of infrastructure, now faces another big challenge, and that is the widening digital divide. Even in the national capital, when government schools started online classes during the lockdown, the attendance hovered around 25 to 30%. Another thing staring at us is the national education policy released in a hurry during the pandemic by the government in July has again put pressure, and many states are not clear on the implementation part. Educators are challenged to make a change blended with the traditional mode. The positive effects, however, are those. It can be argued that pandemic also had a positive effect. The challenge of moving online enabled everyone to move a step higher in the methods of instruction. The digital education in India came to the center stage and is now integrated in the mainstream. The pandemic certainly opened new paths to innovate methods of transmission of knowledge across the globe. But it was a very challenging task as people living in rural areas without internet access, while others attend more poorly equipped government-run schools. Many efforts are made to continue education at all levels with online methods, but could not be made available this year. Somewhere I read on the internet this quote attributed to Marvin Minsky. You don't understand anything until you learn it more than one way. This quote was certainly illustrated during the pandemic as teachers used diverse methods for teaching and learning. COVID-19 did force the educators to adopt digital technologies to deliver education. Educational institutions moved towards blended learning and encouraged teachers and students to become technology savvy. Soft technology, webinars, virtual classrooms, teleconferencing, digital exams and assessments became the common phenomenon, where otherwise we might have merely defined them or they might have come into use a decade later. Friends, what then is our response? It is precisely during these times that leadership demands that we follow the path of compassion, sensitivity, and altruism. Even if we are in school communities, as many would be, most of our communities, we must look at the number of areas where special attention can be given to the needs of the girl child. Most of our schools are girls' schools, and we need to see how and to what extent we are taking care of their needs as far as their uplift is concerned. How do we bridge the gap of divide between boys and girls, sensitizing the parents on gender bias? More importantly, how do we educate the boys in some of our schools where it is co-ed? How do we counter the hate campaign that is every day destroying the fabric of our nation to be secular? National education policy, how are we preparing for it? Do we, for instance, take note of the poor children and take care that girls are not withdrawn from our schools? The pandemic has thrown new challenges centering around our children. Mental health is a huge area. And are we even geared to deal with this? How are we going to provide care and support? Are we keen observers of the children under our care to find out as to who is having difficulties at home, whether they come from a broken family or if parents are sick or lost their jobs or are not there at all? Do we have counseling sessions for these children that might need it? Do we have a mechanism to find out if the child is being abused by one of the relatives or neighbors or someone else? Do we motivate children and parents from richer families to be sensitive to the needs of the less fortunate? How do we, in leadership roles, shift our focus from discipline and high grades in board exams to overall development of children and towards healthy values for coexistence in society? Pope Francis called on all those who have positions of responsibility in economic, political, and social life to not allow omens of destruction and death to accompany the advance of this world, and for ordinary people to become protectors of humanity. It means protecting all creation, the beauty of the created world, as the book of Genesis tells us, and as Saint Francis of Assisi showed us. It means respecting each of God's creatures and respecting environment in which we live. It means protecting people, showing loving concern for each and every person, especially children, the elderly, those in need, who are often the last we think about. It means caring for one another in our families. Husbands and wives first protect one another, and then, as parents, they care for their children, and children themselves, in time, protect their parents. It means building sincere friendships in which we protect one another in trust, respect, and goodness. In the end, everything has been entrusted to our protection, and all of us are responsible for it. To conclude, what then is the world beckoning us to? Is it the comfort zone of our long established institutions, confined to mere administration and a feel-good factor? Or are we all alive to all that is happening around us? How are we protecting the girls under our care? Are we ready to stand alone in our role as leaders with a prophetic voice, completely bereft of titles, position, power, and the rest? Action, my friends, is the key. A true leader wants to draw others to act upon the vision and to see to its fruition. Once people are possessed by the passion, they are inspired to sacrifice everything else for it. If leaders today inspire such passion for service, this world will be a better place. This poses a big challenge to our leadership. What is our involvement beyond the four walls? It is true, we are doing a lot, and we are doing quite well to some extent. But the way of Jesus Christ demands always more, and it is absolutely challenging. He invites us to have a heart of the gospel. See the way Christ did, feel the way he did. And though that is a tall order, my friends, he is there by our side to help us to look beyond and help us to walk with him. Thank you. Once again, a very happy Women's Day and happy to celebrate with all of you. God bless you.
Thank you, Sister Nirmalini, for your thought-provoking and challenging sharing with us. You highlighted the giftedness of women. You paid your tribute to our heroic women who have played a significant role in society, especially during the COVID-19 period. You explained the negative and positive impact of the pandemic on education, which is the major concern of our present time, and inspired us to respond to it positively, with compassion and with empathy. You highlighted the church's status on women and the need for women leadership in the church. you have given us a challenge to demonstrate our creative response to what the world is beckoning us today. Thank you, sister, for bringing the world and making it vivid, the reality of COVID-19 world with concrete examples. The positive and negative impact of digital learning in education in the task of transmission of knowledge. Thank you for inspiring and giving us the call to become true leaders, challenging leaders, and to give our best to the society in our educational institutions. A lot more needs to be done in the field of women education in India. Yes, women have so much unexplored potential which has scarcely been tapped. Despite this progress in education, evidence suggests that many women remain unable to achieve their goals. The gap in earnings between women and men, although smaller than it was years ago, is still significant. Women continue to be underrepresented in certain industries and occupations, and too many women struggle to combine aspiration for work and family. Our next speaker is Mrs. Anita Cheria, the coordinator of Justice Coalition of Religions South India. Anita Cheria has worked in the social sector for over 30 years. She has volunteered and consulted with several campaigns and organizations, written extensively on human rights, on issues varying from Adivasi land rights, sexual abuse in work and religious spaces, and rights for sexual and gender minorities. At present, she divides the time between being director of Open Space, a campaign support and training organization, consults with the Norwegian Human Rights Fund and JCoR, the Justice Coalition of Religious. One thing consistent between all this is working with a gender bias. We have the right person to speak on work and women on this occasion. Now over to Anita Cheria.
Thank you, Sister Clarice, for a very elaborate introduction, and certainly my pleasure to be here. The sense of us 400 plus within a room celebrating Women's Day, International Women's Day, seems just so appropriate. And sharing space with Carmel is certainly like very special for me. It's been my home and school for many years, a place that has inspired me to feel confident, a sense of belonging, and also creating a joy in learning that never leaves you once you leave the school. It's more than 35 years since I've left school, but it still was very exciting to just walk in through the gates of Carmel in Bangalore, even though I haven't studied here. Yeah. So happy to be here with you, and I hope we can spend another 15-20 minutes looking at women and work, which I think is another pillar of our survival. Health, education, and work takes a major part of our responsibilities and roles. So let me share the best I can. I'm apologizing ahead that I'm going to be attacking you with a PowerPoint, hoping to try to communicate more in a short time with a very enthusiastic audience. I will be skipping some of it because some of the points have already come in. And so we will try to move as soon as, as quickly as we can, making sense of the challenges we face today. Clarice, can my screen be seen?
No, Anita, we can't see your screen as yet.
It takes a
Okay.
second.
Okay.
Yes, now we can see it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, yes. So my presentation would be around women and work. This year, the themes that Clarice also highlighted was achieving an equal future in a COVID-19 world. That's something we really feel a kind of kinship with as women, because equality is something that we have been juggling and struggling for years together, pre-COVID too. It's not like it's the first time that women are talking about equality. But the other theme too, challenging stereotypes, challenging the world in which we live, is part of or essential to achieving this equal future. So I will start with talking about, or at least quickly introducing you to a few positive images where women's leadership has been challenging stereotypes. The first, this picture is from a small center in Kerala. It's called the Archana Women's Center. Where a number of women during the peak of COVID came together under the leadership of this organization to start making PPE kits in villages and actually making a living where there didn't seem to be any hope for survival left to them. And it has worked and still continues to work over a year. This kind of strategic leadership is, I think, what makes some women different, and we all strive towards it. This is a scene from Tikri border from yesterday. Women farmers sitting together in solidarity and looking at their rights and their assertion in this very challenging times. The third woman I introduce to you is Rukmani, a women's union leader from Bangalore. She had hardly studied in school for 3 months and then supported her family as she grew up, got married, and started work here in Bangalore 25 years back as a garment worker. Over time, with her leadership and her attitude, I don't think anything could stop her from starting to question the world around her. Just last month, she's been awarded the Bremen Solidarity Prize, which is a very prestigious award started about 17 years back. And the first prize winners were Nelson Mandela and Winnie. So this is the kind of leadership that is possible. She now speaks in any language you want to communicate to her because she understands workers' rights much better than most people around her. She can speak to brands, she can speak to political leaders, she can speak to international forums, and she does it in the language she's comfortable with, but she makes sure she communicates. The next is from a very remote rural village. They too celebrated the International Women's Day. These are Dalit women in a very remote village in Raichur, which is one of the northern districts in Karnataka. For those of who are not familiar, it's a very dry region, a very tough and challenging life. But these women have come together representing 2 taluks in the district and discussing their issues, Dalit women and human rights, access to work, and now the women are coming together to make sure that the entitlements that they have should come to each and every one of them, and most effort goes to reaching out to the most vulnerable among them. So these are some women that have inspired me to see the possibilities of engagement of women's leadership in everyday life. These are working women, working class women with a spirit and attitude to never compromise with anything unjust around them. The next section of my presentation, a short one, is about women and our world of work. It's not as though the world of work was less challenging pre-COVID. Most often, on a daily basis, adult women, as the previous speakers also spoke about, are often seen as dedicated to work and service. Caregiving is a major part of our day for most of us. And if you are within a family, then you end up taking care of men and women, men from all age groups, and women maybe only the elders and the toddlers. But then there is also cooking, there is a million chores that you're bound to. But most important, I think that somehow takes away the positivity that you get from seeing a smile when you take care of people is about taking blame for anything that goes wrong. Things that really pull you down, notwithstanding the fact that all this work is usually unpaid. The next problem about this whole stereotyping of women is the fact that this image of women that she doesn't need to be paid and can be taken for granted sticks to her whether she goes to a formal office, a construction site, a school, or a religious institution. The fact that people often take it for granted that women would rise up to perform things that are not in her job profile and would keep silent if there's decision making going on around her. This is true not just of corporate spaces, not just of religious spaces, it's true even in the parliament and the panchayat. So this is a constant fight. This is not related to COVID, but this is about this gender stereotyping that we women, particularly in India, are facing. Now coming to the COVID-19 changes that has come. This has created or exacerbated the challenges that we face in a way that we could have never imagined before. Being restricted to a small space, the lockdown and what it did to families which didn't have a safe housing space is things that we can't even imagine if we are, as of now, attending a Zoom call for more than 2 hours without being disturbed. Not many women in India have that opportunity or that space. Many women are crammed into small 10 by 10 spaces, maybe in a hostile space, maybe in a noisy space, certainly no privacy. And so the lockdown also meant that you couldn't access help in case of facing violence, in case of the need to just have a change. And it meant more stress because this was layered over the stress that they already faced of doubling their work and doubling their efforts to take care of the people who left home for a while, at least for some time, to having them always there. So I think one part of women at work, COVID or no COVID, is challenging the stereotypes we seem to be trapped with. Yeah. There were some things related to the world of work, particularly the economy, that were pre-COVID. One was an increasing trend of informalizing employment in factories and workspaces. Many more people are now being taken on contracts. We have uses of terms like unorganized worker, informal workers being used very casually. Basically, what it means is that you wouldn't need to pay them a decent wage. You wouldn't need to be responsible. The employer is not responsible for the worker the minute they stop work. So the worker has no kind of social security or security of contract. There was also a lowering of wages in many places because the economy didn't seem to be doing well and getting a job itself seemed a challenge. Another thing that is representative in our country is of hard physical labor being devalued. So in most of these places, compliance would mean giving the minimum wage. The minimum wage becomes the maximum for most daily wage earners. Another aspect of workers' rights would be having access to their own institutions, of unionizing, of being able to put in their demands to an institution, despite the fact they have no kind of risk-taking capability or any kind of resource backup. In India, trade unions have largely been dominated by men affiliated to political parties, and so these spaces also seem to leave out women in a big way. So it's very rarely and very recently that women have started entering these spaces and making their presence felt. But this also disempowers women workers. So women workers living in a society that is socially biased, that often doesn't recognize her existence as one of agency, is usually socialized to not being aware of her own rights, neither as women nor as workers, and not thinking that it is her right to complain because she doesn't think of herself as having a right to even some kind of dignity. Then there are particular sectors that are even worse than others, which has a kind of a feudal legacy that goes on. Mining, tea estates, textile mills. Bangalore, the city where I live, is humming like a buzzing city when it comes to ready-made garments. It's an export surplus, it's an export-oriented industry, extremely high technology being used. More than 10 to 12 lakh women are employed, and all of them are on minimum wages. Now I come to the next section, which is about a COVID response from women leaders. Many of us here are in positions of decision making or inspire people in positions of decision making, or might have a say in getting into those conversations. So here I would try to emphasize some more nuanced points that we need to be a little more aware of when we get into this kind of space. One is that each one of us is not free of bias. However progressive we think we are, there are some things that we kind of don't realize and normalize because of our upbringing. During the COVID, we saw the working class being looked at as with suspicion, almost like a hot potato you need to let go for your own safety. And they were seen as COVID carriers. They were shunned out of their spaces, shunned out of their workplace, shunned out of their houses, shunned out as domestic workers from many houses. So this kind of bias, a class bias, is extremely disempowering and colors the way in which we look at the world and colors the way in which we can support care. The next is on mapping relief. Make sure that we prioritize support. When we prioritize support, be mindful of the vulnerabilities that people face. There might be coexisting vulnerabilities. So if you're working with workers, then there might be migrant workers, contract workers, single women workers, differently abled people, people from religious minority. Basically, try to reach out and find out who has a chance to be left out. So ensure that all data points of relief are checked to address special concerns of women. Try to be aware of gender-based violence, which has increased in a big way since COVID, because everybody is stressed. And as I said, it's very normal to make women take the blame for everything. So violence is focused at her. And then how do we kind of try to give some kind of a space or relief to that? It could be to organize small meetings, individual conversations. Many of us reach out through students, through some kind of associations, self-help groups or women's institutions that are specialized in counseling, but make sure we are listening to people who might be most likely to remain silent. The other is to support workers or people we support with facts. Facts on the virus, facts on communal hatred, facts on entitlement. There is no need for us to exaggerate things, but if we can share facts, because there is a huge digital divide, a lot of things are taken for granted, and an extra effort to share facts would help the community that is disempowered around us. While we do recognize our vulnerabilities, we should not be blind to the opportunities too. During COVID too, many businesses have flourished. People have come up in different ways. People have innovated. So these are things that we keep track of to the best of our ability and try to crowdsource our intelligence and our understanding about issues. Some issues could be intersectional. in the sense that when we are dealing with women workers, pay a little more attention to migrant women, Dalit women, Adivasi women, home-based women, basically any identity which would make women more vulnerable among women themselves. There is this idea of single women that is often highlighted, and in many discussions, a lot of married women also told me that at most times, many of them feel single because they are dealing with a lot of issues on by themselves. And the other important aspect that was highlighted even before was this whole thing of resources being channelized through the digital media, through the digital platforms, which is actually inaccessible, sometimes not only inaccessible, difficult even to understand for many people. So that's an area that we would need to ensure support. Another aspect when it comes to women and the need or the ability of being enabled to perform are some of the larger public spaces and services that we lack access to. So other than the digital divide, there is a lack of public transport. Women are often invisibilized in many ways. So if it's property, it's usually in the name of men. If it's land and if it's displacement, women often get unrecognized, they are not counted, they are not even in the count for people who need to be compensated. Many a times in work groups, women are employed as assistants, and again only the maestri gets, or the person who leads the group gets paid, and often it is he, most often it is a he, who has the prerogative to share the wages in the way they want. So women traditionally and economically get left out of being counted or being accounted for in spaces where they are dependent for their wages, for their livelihood, for their respect, and for their legitimacy to be there. About 90% recent reports, certainly after this large exodus of migrant workers that we all saw on our TV screens during COVID, there was a lot of counting and surveys done of people in informal work, basically people who don't have secure contracts. And India came up with numbers which were like 90% of the workforce right now in India, over 90% are informal workers. So the number of us who are working in schools, in colleges, with government jobs make up a very, very small percentage of the workers, particularly women workers within India. Some things that can be of access to decision makers is to look at existing policy and platforms where such issues are being discussed. Issues of inclusion, issues of violence, issues of rights. So one is, if you're working in the corporate sector, in anything to do with business, be aware of the gaps in recruitment, in procurement, in investment in the industry, in the staffing patterns. There are some international supportive frameworks like CEDAW and other gender-based right frameworks that we can refer to. There are also resources from organizations like the UNICEF, which look at standards for business operations that affect children. In India, there is a process of something called the National Action Plan, which outlines the framework in which business in India should be functioning. It looks at multi-stakeholders, at government, at corporates, at trade unions, at NGOs, at people who are concerned with the way these operations and transactions happen. This is a place where we can voice our concerns. Groups like the ILO and UNICEF, like I mentioned earlier, are places where are now being quite friendly in terms of engaging with people who are working on the ground and are bringing out lists of best practices and checklists for supportive of children at work. As teachers, I think one space that many of you are dealing with is with children. And And many teachers in rural areas, I think, have innovated. I don't know if we'll have time to share best practices, but there have been many innovations in the space of teaching, of how to reach out beyond the digital divide in clusters, in different formats, where the digital turns, I mean, you have multi-platform kind of usages, from print to face-to-face meetings, to telephones, to books, to printouts being shared, to group learning and things like that. So it always takes innovation to break out of these challenges which seem so overwhelming. And the most important thing is to reach out to the most silent stakeholder in your domain. Okay. Yeah. When I talk about tools, I don't mean it will be easy. It is difficult. When it comes to women, there's always a kind of a political issue, because it's not just the problem that we are there to solve. There are also many attempts when women assert their rights that it is seen as a kind of assertion that is destabilizing. So when women assert their rights, it is seen as a contempt of tradition. So when women farmers were asserting rights, they thought it was not their concern. And also there was an issue that says that if we can convert this into a law and order problem, it becomes much easier. Or we are blackmailed or pressurized under the framework of tradition, where religious institutions and other institutions, family institutions, which silence women who question stereotypical roles. So other than using these international frameworks and national frameworks, it also means that we are fighting the traditional challenges that our community faces. I think we are really running out of time. I would have liked to share one framework that is useful to measure these kind of issues of exclusion and development. They are called the Sdg Goals. Since all of you are familiar with the internet, these are things that you can easily access online. I would just run these slides through, and this will be shared with you with the presentations or with the recording. So this is one framework that is used from the Panchayat to the UN and highly accepted by the Indian government at all levels, from the district to the state to the national level. So you could just Google SDG goals, look at women in work, look at women in health, and look at the indicators that the government is using, and try to use that to measure the exclusion or discrimination that you see in your own area. Another area is understanding sexual harassment at work. We have special laws, from fundamental laws to a special act that sets up systems and processes at all workplaces. This too is very extensively covered through websites, through the Women and Health, through the Women and Child Department and the Women's Commissions. There is a lot of material on checklists that are available online. Please go through that and try to use every tool that is available to ensure that the world of work can become better for each one of us. Thank you. Yeah. Clarice, I will stop here in the interest of time. Yeah. Thank you very much. I will stop sharing screen too. Yeah.
So thank you, Anita, for sharing your vast knowledge in such a short time. In fact, it was an informative session presented with PPT. You highlighted the status of women and our world of work, role of women and work in a COVID-19. We need to challenge stereotypes that trap and disempower us, prioritizing women's safety. Women's access to decent paid work is an undisputed ethical and economic imperative, as well as a primary human right and aspiration. It is clear that the current under participation of women in paid employment in India is not due to their lack of will. COVID response to women leaders to look beyond biases, to have a relief mapping is wonderful. While the pandemic has spelled doomsday for most of women from the working class, and not to be blind to recognize opportunities that come our way. This is in fact a calling to us. You put before us the disturbing pre-COVID test and also intersectional issues, checklists for decision workers, the lack of political will to resolve issues, and finally, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Yes, the working woman in India continues to face stiff challenges and social resistance even in the 21st century. The key to transforming the social status of a working woman lies primarily in our own hands. Women need to be more assertive and aware of their own rights at home as well as at work. The assertiveness and initiative of the working women themselves for their own rights can do more for their empowerment than all other forces combined. Thank you, Anita, for your informative talk. With this, we end the speakers session now. A hearty thanks and appreciation to all our speakers of the day. Now, if there are any questions, the chat box already answered by, one question is answered by Dr. Saldana. Don't see any questions, but we see the appreciation and the comments that are made. So Anita, I think we can go to the last conclusion now, since there are no questions.
I did have a question, Sister Clarice. It was for Dr. Soiba Saldana. I'm a cancer survivor, breast cancer survivor, and mine was a third stage of breast cancer, but there was no lump. It was kind of invisible breast cancer. I don't know how. So I would like her to talk a little bit about, like she said, you can self-examine yourself if to see if there's a lump. Now, I had no lump, and yet I was in my third stage of cancer. It's a miracle I'm alive. So perhaps you could tell us a little more about this invisible lump, or this internal lump which one cannot see nor feel.
I'm so happy to hear that and to know that you're well. What you're saying is very important. So there are three areas we look at. So one thing is, whenever after the period is over is when the breast is softest. As most of you women will know that before the periods, our breasts are a little lumpy and painful. So immediately after the period is over, by the 4th, 5th or 6th day, we should examine. First, we should look at the breast in the mirror, because the other signs which are not like a lump would be a puckering of the skin, or it could be a small ulcer, or it could be some discoloration on the breast. All these are possible signs of a cancer which is not a lump. Then we examine the breast and we check for any lumps. We also examine the underarms, because if you feel, sometimes there may be no breast in the lump which we can feel, but there are lymph nodes which we can palpate. So it feels like a small peanut or a small walnut, or a tight wad of cotton wool, if you feel that on your fingertips. So it's very important to start feeling our breasts by the age of 20, 25 and examining them at least once in 2 to 3 months, because it gives us an idea of what is normal. Once I know what is normal, then if something new comes up, I can notice it. And the third thing we always do is press the nipple gently to see if there's a discharge. If it is a reddish or a blackish discharge, or there is some whitish material in it, then we know that this could also be a ductal cancer, and that also can be, has to be examined even in the absence of a lump. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think that would be useful for people to know.
Thank you, Dr. Shoiba. A lovely name. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Sister Clarice.
Anybody else would like to pose a question to any of the speakers? Or hungry?
I just want to say a big congratulations to Anita. I've spoken to you many times on the phone and a lot of communication through emails and WhatsApp and whatnot. But your exposition was really excellent. So I want to say a big thank you to you, Anita Cheria. I've known you for some time now, but that's wonderful to hear you speaking.
Thank you, Madita.
Sister
Very
Lydia.
well done.
Sister
Very well
Lydia.
done, Anita.
Yes, Sister Lydia.
Yeah, I have actually posed a question to Dr. Saldana. In summary, it is this, that men are the privileged lot, and it is they who can do a lot towards the perfect health of or personal health of women. What would you suggest that men could do, and what would you tell them?
Yes, Sister Lydia, the important thing is to understand that it starts from childhood. From the time a boy is born, I'm a gynecologist, when a boy is born, the way the people react as compared to when a girl child is born already gives the child the fact that she is a lesser wanted human. So the first thing is for parents right now, few younger couples, more educated, they say we just want one child, either boy or girl. We would prefer a girl. But unfortunately, in the largely rural and the business communities, they still believe that boys are the people who will continue the work or take care of the parents. And actually, surprisingly, now I see that a lot of women who are the only children of their parents do take care of their parents. They're looking after them very competently. So these things have to break. But these are, this is a 2000 years of patriarchal notions which cause this. So I think that also makes a difference, that how do we change that? And it's by educating boys. Very often when we would go to schools to take sexuality education and talking about reproductive health, the principals would say, yes, doctor, you have to talk to our girls to tell them to be safe. And I would say, no, I have to talk to the boys to ensure that the girls are safe. So this whole concept that girls have to have the responsibility of their own safety, it isn't correct. So I feel the way we work with boys is having more gender classes for boys in schools, gender classes for teachers. There was an interesting study done in the US where they asked teachers that, do you think boys and girls are equal? They said, yes, absolutely. All the teachers said the same, that we believe boys and girls are equal and they are, equally intelligent. But, invariably when things were to be done, like a class party has to be organized or function, the girls were given the things of decorations and organizing the food, and the boys would have picking up the benches and carrying stones. Now women have as much strong muscles as boys. There are some children who are weaker, some children who are stronger. So when we actually look at the lens, what they found was invariably over a period of time, the unconscious message that the teachers were giving was that boys are strong, boys are tough, boys can manage money, and women are only good for cooking food, taking care of friends. Like if a child is sick, they will tell another girl to take the child to the sick room. Why not a boy who's a friend of the person? A boy can take the child. Boys can be nurturing, they can be caring, they can be loving. Boys can cook beautifully, they can decorate, they're artistic. We have to bring up these gentler, nurturing qualities of boys and men to get a safer, wonderful society. And of course, women are empowered, women are getting tougher, and I'm so happy about that.
Doctor, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am
Uma, yes?
Yes, doctor. Yes. My question is, if a parent, if a lady, if a woman is feeding time, during the feeding time, how will she check how will she come to know whether she's having some problem with her breast or anything, as you told, like how will she find out?
Yeah, so that's why it's very important that when women are planning a baby, they should have a breast examination, because as you all know, the first few months when the woman is pregnant, breasts become very painful. And once the breast is full of milk and lactating, It's not easy to make out any lumps, but an ultrasound can be done even while she's breastfeeding. And here I would like to mention that my friends who are cancer surgeons, breast cancer surgeons, have informed me that they're getting cases of very malignant breast cancer in 26, 28, 30, 34-year-old women who have taken a lot of hormone treatment for fertility. So they are constant. So when a couple is not able to have a baby for 1 or 2 years, immediately the family pressure is such, they go to hospitals, they start taking hormone injections. A lot of this IVF, IUI, all these procedures are extremely harmful. I would often ask men, how many of them would be willing to take testosterone and other harsh hormone injections just to have a baby, which women are routinely being given. And normally they'll go for 1 year to a doctor, they take so many injections and the person says, no, this is not working. They go to another doctor, again, the injections are given. So there's a very, very problematic issue of cancers. So my friends have told me they've had 4 cases in the last 1 year of young women who are breastfeeding small babies, 8 months, 6 month, 1-year-old babies who have been detected with breast cancer.
Any symptoms for it that the mother will know?
No, but actually even when a woman is breastfeeding, after she finishes breastfeeding, the breast is empty. There should not be any lumps. If she feels any lump, whether it's painful or not, she should go and see a doctor.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
And we can do a small needle test. Even if she's breastfeeding, we do the fine needle aspiration or a small biopsy, which is absolutely painless and done in the OPD. That can be done and it can confirm that there is not malignancy or not.
Thank you so much.
So thank you, doctor. Everyone has inside of her a piece of good news. The good news is that you don't know how great you can be, how much you can love, what you can accomplish, and what your potential is. This is the summary from the 3 speakers we can derive, as Anne Frank says. Let us strive towards that. With this, I invite Ms. Teresa, the young and energetic woman leader, the coordinator of Justice Coalition of Religious, New York, to give us concluding reflections and vote of thanks. Over to Teresa, New York.
Thank you so much, Sister Clarice. It is absolutely wonderful to be celebrating this important day with all of you. And it is truly a privilege and a pleasure for me to get to know all of you, to hear from you, to learn from you. It is tremendous honor. And I'm very humbled to even get to say a few words following you. I'm so grateful for what you've shared from your various experiences in the worlds of health, of education, of work. Your backgrounds are so deeply rooted in a sense of justice and a sense of equal dignity for women and men, for girls and boys, and really incite us all to a sense that we all have a role to play, whatever our particular ministry might be. We can surely find that the effects of gender inequity are at work in any space, and that we are always invited to have a voice and to stand on the side of greater justice, greater equality, greater recognition for the full dignity of women and girls as creatures, as co-creators of God. And so with that in mind, I thank you all very deeply, and will just offer us a small closing reflection based on my lessons that I'll be taking away from all of the rich sharing from our time together today. God, in whose image woman as well as man was created, bring peace to all women choosing to care for themselves, with the understanding that healing ourselves is essential for healing others. Grant confidence to all women seeking enlightenment and empowerment, with the understanding that this step is essential to drawing others into enlightenment and empowerment. Ignite the creative powers of all women seeking to bring joy and justice to the world, with the understanding that their creative gifts extend far beyond their capacity to bear and raise children. Strengthen the will of all women walking a path that few women have taken ahead of them, with the understanding that their journey will pave a smoother road for the women and girls to come after them. Inspire the imaginations of all women and girls, daring to envision a future free from the gender discrimination and inequalities that plague us today. And God, unite the hearts and voices of all women and girls, and the men and boys who have learned to love and honor them as full partners, in the joyous, holy rebellion against the violence and exclusion that holds us back from the beloved community that you intend for us. Amen.
Heartfelt thanks to you, Teresa, for sharing your beautiful reflections and prayer as we conclude this session.